Hello, I'm Chris Valkoinen. We're at Steam Museum here in Swindon, and today we're looking at City of Truro. City of Truro was built in 1903, just a year after George Jackson Churchward had taken over as Chief Mechanical Engineer of the Great Western Railway. So the Great Western Railway had finished the decade before converting its track from the broad gauge to the standard gauge, reducing the width of its track from 7 foot to 4 foot 8.5. The broad gauge had been Brunel's idea for a fast and smooth railway, relying on the wide width of the tracks to have a low centre of gravity. However, it introduced lots of problems for the railway going forward, because every time a train needed to go from the broad gauge to a standard gauge, everything on the train had to be offloaded onto a different train that could travel on the different tracks. For a long period of time, the GWR had used mixed gauge track to allow it to run both types of trains, but this wasn't practical on a long-term basis and thus had ripped up all of the broad gauge just to leave the standard gauge behind. With all of that done, the GWR could now focus on other tasks, in particular improving the quality of its rolling stock and its locomotives. When George Jackson Churchward had taken over as the CME of the GWR in 1902, straight away Churchward started introducing new experimental locomotives. That included locomotives that he took as a trial from France that were compound locomotives, as well as his 2 experimental Saint-class locomotives. However, another one of those experiments that Churchward tried was with the City class. Here, he took one of the 440 Atborough classes called Mauritius and trialled a brand new boiler, the first tapered boiler design on the GWR. Those experiments led to a really interesting locomotive in the City class, which is a mix of 19th century design and up-to-date 20th century design. So these 20th century modifications made for a much more powerful engine, and that may have allowed it to achieve a special record.